All right. I believe that we are now live on Facebook. And I am so excited. Wednesdays are my absolute favorite day of the week because I get to do this. I get to sit with experts in various areas. I get to have these dynamic conversations. And tonight will be just the same. And so I'm so excited to introduce the show to you that we will be having this evening. So my name is Teese, and I am the host of Woke Wednesday. Woke Wednesday is an urban tea series that explores relevant topics of discussion to help us stay woke. That means to remain current and informed, or to help us to get woke, to learn something new and gain a new perspective on what's happening in our world, our communities, and in our personal lives in order to become healthy, happy, and whole. So tonight, in this episode of Woke Wednesday, I will speak with personnel from Vera House on the topic of domestic violence. So they will share with us the current status of domestic violence within our communities, the signs of abuse that we all should be aware of, what kind of support is available and where to seek it, and how we can best support our loved ones who may be victims and get them the help that they need. So before we get started, I want to ask everyone to share this event. I want you to share with whoever you think might be interested and might want to know, might want to learn more, and who needs to hear this, to be honest. Go ahead and start a watch party on Facebook, and be sure to send your questions and comments because we definitely want to hear from you. I have questions of my own that I will be asking the panelists, but we want to make sure that you get what you need as well. I like emojis, send those too. I just want to interact with you. I want to engage with you, and we want to hear from you. All right, so I didn't go into all of what Vera House is, but we will be sharing that with you as well because it is a very valuable resource within our community, and each of the panelists are from there that we'll be speaking with tonight. So the first thing I'd like to do is to dive right in with some introductions. So we want to hear from our panelists who they are and the perspectives that they bring to the conversation. So just briefly, why don't we start with Desiree?
Of course. My name is Desiree Williams. I work at Vera House and I am the Alternatives and Steps Program Coordinator. And what that is I work and help educate men and women that are perpetrators of violence. So they either mandated through parole, probation, the court system, or children and family services. And my primary purpose is that it helps change generational culture about domestic violence and abuse. And that's what I do all year. Thank you.
Wonderful. Who's next?
I can go
next.
Oops.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay. So my name is Cynthia Griffin-Harris, and I am the director of Vera House Shelter Services. And what I do is manage the day-to-day functions of the shelter services where victims of domestic violence come to stay for a short period with us to heal and to help bring restoration to their domestic violence situation. I do it because I love this community and I know that this community needs a lot of healing and a lot of hope to bring them to a complete restoration.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm Randi Bregman. I use the pronoun she and her. I serve as the co-executive director of Vera House, and I'm honored to work among the amazing folks joining me here today. I've been at Vera House 31 years, so I've watched us evolve from a very small program to trying to enhance services and best meet the larger needs of the community. I'm glad to be here with everybody tonight.
And my name is Plvan-Franke. I use the pronouns he, him. I am a prevention educator. I work primarily in men's engagement. I am also the project coordinator for our Abuse in Later Life eCore project, which stands for expanding community-based options to respond to elder abuse. And we use restorative practices in that grant. So thank you for having us very much.
Wonderful. I'm excited to have you. And, you know, this show is a little, the last show that I hosted was The New Face of Tech. So it was on how the tech industry is evolving and more diverse individuals are entering into that space. So you can see that this topic is very different from that one. But honestly, it's all in the same vein of supporting the community. And it's all in the same vein of thinking about what are the things that impact the urban community and how I can share information in order to elevate, in order to inform, in order to provide assistance where it may be needed in whatever space it is. And so it all folds into the same thing. And to be honest, I'm very happy to be having this conversation because from what I understand, domestic violence is on the rise in our communities with the onset of COVID-19. And so we'll get into that. But why don't we start here with something that may be very fundamental, but I like to start with the basics. What is domestic violence? The reason I ask that is because I think that I know for myself, I may have a very limited view on what that is. And honestly, Eli, when you mentioned elder abuse, my ears perked, even with that mention. And so why don't we just start there with the basic? What is it? What are some of the forms of domestic violence that exist? What are some of the examples of domestic violence?
I'll start
Sure.
off.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I
You
did
go
it
ahead,
again.
Cynthia.
I apologize. You sure, Eli? You can go.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I can follow.
Ladies
So
first.
in its simplest form, when I think about domestic violence, I think about an aggression and a violent behavior towards family members within a family system. And with that, it can be emotional abuse, verbal abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, and definitely physical abuse. So it's just violence within the family system. And when I think of family systems, I'm not just talking about biological family systems that live together, buy together, and somehow there is abuse and violence that have occurred within that system itself.
Mhm. Eli, did you
Yeah,
want to comment on that?
absolutely. I think Cynthia, you hit really you hit it right on because when people think of domestic violence, I think there's sort of this vision in their head. It's usually a man perpetrating violence towards a woman in a household setting, and it's usually physical. It's usually hitting, kicking, things like that. But domestic violence is more fluid than that. There's many forms to it, as Cynthia alluded to. There's emotional and verbal abuse. There's spiritual abuse, and people don't always consider those as having being part of the cycle and part of the whole pattern of domestic violence holistically.
Yeah.
One thing I think I would just add quickly is that in the many years of experience and the survivors I've had the honor to walk alongside of, people will tell us the physical wounds heal, the emotional wounds are much harder to heal. So people often focus first on the physical and thinking, well, that has to be the worst thing. But people will tell you years later, the tape's still playing in their head of the messages, the degrading comments, the way that a perpetrator of abuse made them feel less than whole. And so I think it's really important to look at the emotional abuse as equally important, if not more so, to some of the physical violence we tend to focus on.
Mhm. Yeah, that goes back to, like I said, the sometimes the limited view that we have when we mention domestic violence. I was listening to it was just like a YouTube, I think it was like a TED Talk actually. And a woman was in a situation and she didn't even realize that what the situation that she was in was considered abuse until she was out of the situation and was, reframing her. She was expressing her experience that she had gone through. And she realized that that's domestic violence. She didn't realize that because a lot of it was mainly verbal. And she articulated the same thing that you just did, that the words were the things that cut the most, the cut down of her self-esteem, the constant verbal badgering that she faced, because she also did face some physical violence as well eventually. but that was the thing that really hung with her for so long. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe we'll get into financial abuse a little bit later, because that's a little bit different as well. When we think about domestic violence too. Okay. So as I mentioned, as I started the show and wanting to talk about this particular topic, domestic violence, from what I understand, is on the rise with the onset of COVID-19. So just explain to me, what is the current state of domestic violence issues, considering the onset of COVID-19, and how prevalent is it today versus prior to 2020? What does that difference look like? I'm hearing that, I'm sensing that this is the case, and I can certainly understand, with us being on lockdown and quarantine, and us being together in our homes and our domestic situations more, that would make sense. But what is the actual status of this issue in 2021?
Well, I would like to go. I think it's most definitely on the rise. I work with a lot of men, more than women, that are perpetrators of violence. And from their own words, they are forced to be home. So if the relationship is not healthy to begin with, it forces them to stay home and deal with things that they have not dealt with in a long time. And if they have past family trauma and things they haven't worked on, it just compounds the issue. So with COVID-19 happening, and if he lost his job, that's another issue. So it is compounded, and guys are forced, whoever the perpetrator, whether it's man or woman, they may be out of their house now because of order of protections. They could be living on the street. The money is low, or they have jobs that they can't get to because of transportation.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And that is only a few. And the fighting amongst people in a family, it's not just with their partner or their spouse. It is with other family members. It is with this new stimulus money that came out and how that money is going to be spent. They're fighting over, I think I should get half versus not. When you work every day and you take care of your family, and we're blessed to be able to still have a job, we don't understand what that's like. We are a job away from those people. I always look at it that way. But fighting over stimulus money that nobody knew they was going to get in the first place. I mean, big time fights. What should we buy with this money? There's no agreement, but it all boils down to them not having a healthy relationship to begin with. They never had communication to begin with. So now they have to learn to communicate about this money, and it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, they have to learn, but now they're forced to. So not that they came to the mental space of saying, I'm ready to welcome this change, right? It's that it was forced upon them, and maybe weren't quite ready to do that in that way. So mentally, ready to make that step. So, what I'm hearing is that it is on the rise, and it's due to the numerous challenges that COVID-19 has presented to us, not just in the fact that it's a pandemic and a very deadly virus, but all of the after effects that come along with it, including joblessness, homelessness, lack of funds, money, stress, all of those things that sort of go along that, with COVID-19 that we've seen and read and have experienced ourselves.
And Leticia, the first question you asked, you said, what is domestic violence?
Yeah.
And my peers gave you some very good responses to domestic violence. But culturally speaking, sometimes you don't know it's a domestic violence situation. When you talked about the young lady before, she didn't even know she was in the midst of domestic violence until she got out of it. Culturally, sometimes, and I can only speak for my family and my community to some degree, you're taught that if somebody do something to you, you do it back. It is a part of protecting yourself, but it's not looked at as though it's domestic violence initially, until they get big and then the police are called. But it's that little grooming in families that start when we're young, You know, somebody hit you, you hit them back. We had to learn that you can't do that, that you had to communicate. You got to learn that if somebody hit you in school, you can't hit them back. Go talk to another adult. Because if your kid does fight back, both kids are kicked out of school. Now nobody's the winner because nobody's getting an education. So the community is losing all the way around. So I'm thinking for even adults, when women fight guys back, when I have people in my classroom and they're saying, yeah, he hit me, but I hit him back and I did this. I said, but that's still violence. It's hard for them to accept that they are violent just as well. They look at it as though they are defending themselves and they have a right to, because that person hit them first.
Well, that's a very interesting thing. And I think it leads into the next thing that I wanted to ask is, how do you recognize, to your point, some of the violence that we experience could be something that we've seen all along. And it could be something that is very natural and normal to us, even though it hurts. So how do you recognize when you're in a domestic violence situation? What are those initial signs even? And how do you know, how do you know, considering some of the cultural things behind the fact that maybe that was your life to begin with. That's what you saw and that's what you grew up with.
One thing I'm thinking as I listen to you pose that question is I'm remembering back to when I used to lead support group at shelter many years ago. And I remember bringing in a reading and wanting to share it and then move into some other planned part of the afternoon. And I read a quote in the book that said, fear has no place in a loving relationship. Mm. And all of the people in the group said, stop, 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 read that again, read it again, read it again. And coming from a different life experience, I thought, well, doesn't everybody know fear has no place in a loving relationship? But for them, it was really a turning point to talk about one of the first indicators that they saw when they realized they were afraid to speak their truth, to get caught in a situation where they were going to be physically harmed. And so I think fear might be one of the early signs that people can see. I'm interested in other people's thoughts about early signs.
I was thinking about what Des was sharing about it being a culture thing, and definitely agree. It is taught, it is seen in the culture that if someone hits you, fight back, and we see a lot of violence, inter-family violence, and so you can get accustomed to it very fast in inner city. But one thing I think after a while, everyone realized that there's a certain level of pain that you don't want to feel anymore. And you start to realize, hey, this isn't love. This is actually something that hurts me, and that's, I think, what drives a lot of people to the change motivation, that this is pain that is causing me, to not be happy, to not feel good about myself. You asked a question about some of the signs. We do use our power and control wheel to help educate individuals that come into shelter or come into Vera House, just because you don't necessarily know when you become immune to it. And some of those signs or behaviors may be very subtle, such as power and control, where your significant partner don't want you to be around friends or family members. They may start telling you how you should dress. They may start telling you how you should speak. So there's those little subtle power and control mannerisms. They may start telling you how much you can spend, when you can go to the store, when you can't go to the store. And so it starts to gradually increase with the power and control, and eventually it results in physical, but it's all the subtleties of the power and control. You dress the way I want you to dress. Don't go visit your family unless I know where you're going. Don't make a call unless I know where you're going. So those are some of the signs of an unhealthy relationship. When someone is power and controlling your thoughts, making you feel like you're going crazy, you can't think for yourself, you can't dress for yourself, you can't talk for yourself, you can't be around no one except for them. Those are all signs red flags that the person has a level of power and control over you.
Yeah. Wow. So as you were talking, I was thinking that it may be the case for some women, and as we've discussed, men too, when things start out like this, it's hard to put a finger on. It's hard to put a finger on it to say that that's abuse, you know? And so I could kind of see how someone might go along in a situation like this and kind of get deep into it. You know, we're months now, years, maybe even into it, and not even have the realization that now we've progressed, we've moved deeper into this domestic violence situation, and now maybe at the point of, you know, physical violence at that point. And again, you know, every situation is different, right? But as you were talking, I'm like, wow, you know, though, if you don't know what love should feel like, or you don't know for yourself what that looks like, you know, based on your experience or things that you've seen, maybe those things wouldn't be obvious to you right away. Yeah.
Right. And we haven't even touched on sexual abuse, and that goes into the intimate relationship too. Sometimes individuals don't even have control over their body, and they have to have sex with their partner, even though they don't want to, and they don't understand that's a sign of sexual abuse as well.
Right, because they're in a relationship
Hmm.
and maybe feel like, well, I've committed to being in this relationship, so this is all of what goes along with it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Escalation. What's the probability of that? So I've heard the saying, um, well, if he hits you once, he'll hit you again. Right? I've heard that saying. Well, what is the probability, or what have you seen or experienced, or you know, just heard of, as far as, you know, going from, you know, these very small, subtle kind of things into, you know, a full-blown, you know, violent situation? What's the probability of that? And or even, you know, the saying, does that make sense? If he hits you once, he's going to hit you again. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh boy.
It's tough.
I one of the my program that I run, which is the alternatives program, it is a program where I get guys that have been charged with domestic violence.
Mhm.
I've seen it on a scale of 0 to 10. I've seen guys complete the program and they family life flourished. They did well. They reintegrated back with their family. And, you know, one of the reasons I do the program, it feeds my soul when I see a guy 3 years later with his family and they thank me for being a part of the program. And whether I know him or not, I always act as though I definitely remember you. You know, I remember your story. But it makes me happy when a guy does change his behavior so that he can be that role model dad to his kids and be the husband or partner to the young lady he's with. I've seen it happen, but I also seen negatively where the guys didn't heed to the advice that they were given and they ended up in jail again on another domestic violence charge. I firmly believe that it is the support that a person gets when they in the program and when they completes the program. The support that you're given is everything. How their family view them, uh, and just having that family support is just awesome. It makes the difference on whether that guy is successful or not. And the same with women as well.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I would just say that I think the escalation is common, not universal, but most people I know who've been in really unsafe situations where they feared for their life, they look back and they say the early cues are really subtle. Sometimes they were just this very intense jealousy. And I thought the person just loved me so much. And then I realized it was more about control than love. And then I thought, well, if I made this commitment, if we moved in together, if we did whatever thing, it was going to get better. And they kept trying to control the violence of the other person with their own behavior, which usually is not possible. And so it's been our experience many times that the situation does escalate over time. And I think what Desiree said is really important. I think someone who is causing harm can make the commitment, find the support, and make different choices and create not only healthy relationship with their partner, but a healthier sense of themselves and a better place in the world for themselves because they're free of the violence and abuse as well. It's really hard to find support for that in our community, in our world right now. I can remember I used to teach a family violence course at Syracuse University, and I remember having some men who had completed the program that Des now runs, and they came in and would talk to the social work students. And somebody asked them, what happened when somebody in the community challenged your behavior? How did you take that? What difference did it make to you? And every single one of them said things like, people challenged my behavior. Asked me how many people encouraged and said, I would have done one better, and gave me messages that didn't try and turn my behavior. So I think that's where this takes a community solution, where it's not only people in the heat of the moment in the conflict, it's what kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of community do we want to live in? And the words we use in response to people can either move people in a healthier direction or lock them into situations that are unhealthy and harmful. Eli, I don't know if you have some thoughts there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you and Des said is really important because it's kind of two things. One thing is that it does escalate in the forms that we were talking about, in the way that there's grooming behaviors, and domestic violence situations usually start with verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and sort of breaking a person down with that power and control to the point where it gets physically violent. The other thing is that I think that's a great point, Randy, that people do not challenge domestic violence. There's, sayings like, nobody wants to air out their dirty laundry, or what happens in the house stays in the house, that it's family business. And it's people also excuse themselves and can scapegoat that when they see it on the street, when they hear it, when they know family members are doing it, because they say, it's none of my business, it's their problem, they have to figure it out. And what Des sort of alluded to is that when there is that intervention and prevention that offers support and offers new perspectives and ways of looking at a situation and building a healthy relationship, taking accountability for your actions, and then restoring a relationship, there's absolutely possibilities of new hope, of family restoration and everything like that. So it's hard to answer the question of how probable is it when it escalates, because there's so many different paths this thing could go on. And it's more so on the level of support that a person gets and the different steps to intervention that they take so they can offer a new perspective.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I don't know that we always get that perspective, and to know what kind of support is out there and available, or what kind of things we need to do in order to move the needle toward, a safer environment or a safer situation within our families. And Eli, what you said is like hit the nail on the head, because this show is titled Behind the Walls. A lot of this is kept secret, maybe at first, and then once people do know, if you're a family member or a friend on the outside, but that's within their house, that is their household thing to deal with. And I like that you said that this is a community issue that requires a community solution, and we need to be the support for our loved ones. So thank you for sharing that. I did get a question in the chat for Facebook that I want to ask here. This is to anyone. Do you believe that domestic violence is tied to trauma?
Yes, but we can expand on that. I think people who hurt other people have often been hurt. And so we look at the intersecting traumas that happen in lives, and that's not only necessarily growing up in a family with violence, that's the reality of all the ways oppression comes into our lives. so that there's intergenerational trauma for people of color. There's intergenerational trauma for other marginalized communities that's layered on top of what you grew up with, and traumas that may have happened in your own adult life in places where you still haven't healed or found support. And that can intersect with many of the relationships you're in and absolutely contribute to causing more harm and more trauma. I'm interested in others' thoughts.
I think trauma is a big word for people who are not used to hearing the word trauma. They don't understand, wait a minute, I have trauma? They're like, I used to fight all the time when I was younger, but that didn't bother me. And it's like, yes, it did. It shaped who you are as an adult now. And just explaining words that people normally don't hear unless they have been in a helping, have received help somewhere along in their life. If they haven't received help, they don't know about hearing a word about trauma, hearing about domestic violence in their household. What is domestic violence in the household? Some people think it is natural, which Cynthia mentioned earlier. If they've seen it so much that a kid is getting whooped with a belt and, or a stick growing up, they think this stuff is natural. So we have to explain to them that, no, this is trauma, this is abusive, and you don't have to live this way. Once they gain that little bit of knowledge, they can run off and they can even learn more about trauma. But we have to explain trauma if we want people to get it, because this is a big word in community and a lot of people don't know what exactly trauma means.
Yeah, it is a big word, and there's so many types of trauma that we can experience that, like you said, we bring over into our adult lives. And many times we don't even realize, where these triggers are coming from, but they show up in unexpected times and unexpected places. And then, it's something that we have to deal with. I think it's an excellent question, though, that the audience member posed, for sure. I had another comment here. I'll just read it. The majority of the time, the person that's doing the abuse will repeat their abusive behavior because they're used to their wife, their husband, letting them get away with it. What are your thoughts on that comment?
Yeah, I can comment on that for sure. It's hard to say because I take a little bit of issue with the term letting them get away from it, letting them get away with it, because although people can see domestic violence from the outside and say, why doesn't he or she just leave? Why don't they go? And that's hard to do. People don't really know that when you've been groomed into a certain relationship, there may be kids involved, there may be finances involved, and people are interdependent on each other in a way that makes it really hard to just simply get up and leave. That's a big decision, and it's not always a viable solution either. The most dangerous time for a person to act in a domestic violence relationship is actually from the point they leave until 6 months after they have left, which a lot of people don't know. That's the most dangerous time. That's when things like severe violence come in, and even murder sometimes with intimate partners as well. So it's hard to say that I do understand the sentiment that sometimes it is normalized, and especially if they grew up with trauma or in a family that had domestic violence in it, that is natural, as Des alluded to. But it's very, very hard to really touch on the way that domestic violence is different in any situation, and that there's danger involved that people are always, that not everybody from the outside knows about.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, can I just add on what Eli was saying? Also, I think there's the psychological piece of being in it. When you are in a domestic violence relationship, you are being psychologically traumatized. So it's like you're in the fire, you can't see the forest fire until you get out of the fire. You're not thinking straight. Your cognitive ability when you're in it is not thinking straight. You are on a survival mode. And because you're on a survival mode, you're just not consciously thinking of all the solutions and possible ways to completely get out of it yourself. And that's why the services that we offer, some of the support with our advocacy, our educators help individuals to see a solution, because when you're in it, you can't always see the solution because you are in it too deep. So I just wanted to add that. I also was thinking about the piece of why do individuals stay in relationships? And I thought about the criminal system, and also kind of what Eli was alluding to. It gets very dangerous is that sometimes individuals, even once they have pressed charges, they will go back and will try to drop the charges because they feel that it didn't necessarily help their situation, or it didn't help the perpetrator, and so they try to drop the charges, and it just ends up making the situation a lot of times more intense than what they thought it would be. So they rather not even bother with the criminal system, or the police comes out and ends up arresting both the abuser and the victim. I've seen that happen several times, where a victim will call the police and they will end up getting arrested. Maybe they'll run their name and they'll say, oh, guess what? You have a back arrest warrant. Guess what? We got to take you to jail too. That happens. And it's just really not a good situation. I have a friend that has been working in the criminal system for over 30 plus years. And she was talking to me about a month ago, and she says the domestic violence cases are so overloaded in the court system. And a lot of it is not just because they're criminals, it's because they need mental health services too. And that goes for the victim as well as the abuser. So that ties into a little bit why people stay into it.
Yeah. I can't even think of the woman now, her name, but she was on with Gail King, and Gail asked her a couple of questions that gave her pause. But one of the questions was, why did you stay? And she said that she had gotten people saying to her, well, you must have liked it if you stayed. And what she said, it must not have been that bad is the other thing that they said to her. It must not have been that bad that you stayed. And she said her response was that it was so bad that I couldn't leave. And so she, sort of flipped the coin. And I think, being on the outside is very difficult to understand that perspective, and to understand what the mental capacity of a person that is going through that, or what they may be thinking and feeling, and how that might play a part in their decision to stay. Fear and all those other things that go along with it, and financially and family and all those things. But maybe we choose, empathy and compassion, and try to gain some greater understanding. And that's why, conversations like this is so critically important, because we don't know everything. We're all trying to just get it right, but that's why your perspective, sharing that here tonight, is very, very critical to our community. There was another question that came across. It was, yes, you're absolutely right. It was FK Twigs. That was her name. Yeah, you're right. So another question came across. It was, is spiritual abuse emotional abuse? What is spiritual abuse? I'm not even sure I know.
So when we talk about spirituality, we talk about it in two fashions. Number one, spirituality, the inner you, the real you. And then a lot of spirituality is tied to someone's religion, rather it's Christianity, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever their religion is. And when you talk about spiritual abuse, that's when you are interjecting with the person, having a relationship with their inner being. Someone's talking?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I heard someone in the background, but it's when someone is making a decision for you on who you should be authentically as a person, and also what type of religion you should have. Everyone should have the right to choose if they want to be a Catholic, a Christian, a Buddhist, a Muslim. But unfortunately, every individual does not get that option to choose their on religion and they're told what type of religion they should have. And that should be a choice, because the spirituality of a person is the inner being of a person. And that's how they connect with their spiritual deity, whoever their God is.
So from your perspective, you consider it emotional abuse?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the
Mhm.
question as well. That was a really good one to go through. So you won't believe this, but of course, we are, getting through the conversation. So I want to make sure that if you have questions, drop them in the chat and, on the live, and let us know your questions and your comments. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Is some of this resonating with you? Is it making sense? Let us know so we can address some of those comments and questions that you may have. I want to talk about indicators, predictors for, honestly, a victim, right? And I think this is a tough question, and I'm not even sure how to answer it, how to ask it rather. Do you see any common themes with victims, personality types, demographics? Is there something as an indicator for a victim in these situations? And then the same thing on the perpetrator side. Is there an indicator? Is there a demographic? Is there some sign, some cue, something that gives us some sort of sense that maybe this may be a person that will perpetrate abuse, or this may be a person that may be a victim of domestic violence? What are your thoughts on that question, even?
I wouldn't be looking at demographics for that answer, because I think we can end up doing harm by making assumptions about who can be a victim and who can be a perpetrator. And I think each and every one of us can be a victim, can be a perpetrator, and often in relationships have been at different parts of that continuum at some points in our life. So when we think of indicators, we usually think, how might somebody in a relationship recognize that this might be becoming abusive, might be early signs of it, but we don't look at it as if you're this race or this religion. We think that domestic violence and abuse are tied to power and control. Cynthia talked about the power and control wheel earlier. So often if somebody is in a one-up position, they have a little bit more power, they make a little bit more money, maybe they're male instead of female, they're white instead of black, they're in a gay relationship and one is out and the other's not. So those power differentials can be a demographic. But I think most importantly, it's some of those things we talked about earlier as indicators. If you feel worse about yourself when you're with the person than when you're alone, right? If you feel afraid, and not just physically afraid, but emotionally afraid. If I say this, I might get hurt spiritually, hurt emotionally. If you're living in a sense, we talk about sometimes walking on eggshells in your relationship, then those are some of the early indicators. But I would usually be cautious about thinking about demographics, but we'd love to hear from other folks on the panel.
I was just, when she posed the question, I was thinking of, what are some indicators? I don't have the indicators for what a perpetrator may look like versus what a victim may look like, because they're different. I've had teaching alternatives program, which is for perpetrators. I've had lawyers in the program. I've had doctors in the program. I have had people from all walks of life in the program. I've had every culturally nationality, every ethnicity has been in the program. But sometimes that power and control that stands out. And sometimes people with the power and control, they seek a partner who needs them. Mm-hmm. That person may not have a job. If we're talking about heterosexual relationship, the man being an abuser, he'll seek a woman out that don't have a job, that needs him to help pay the bills, and she's vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And that's what we try and help them with, especially the victims that may come across. And in my program, we try and help them and understand that you know, how women should be treated as equal and how to have a non-toxic relationship, a healthy relationship, and what it should look like and how to strive to make that happen. But I can't think of any common trait that a person will have that I can say, look out for this, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's just so wide. It's a very wide question.
Mhm. Well, honestly, that's why I asked it, because I thought that I would get this answer. We can't look at someone and say that this person is going to be a victim. We can't look at someone or read their resume and say that this person is going to be a perpetrator. This problem, this issue is pervasive. And it's, like you said, pervasive across demographics. It's pervasive, you know, across nationalities. It's pervasive across social economic groups. It's pervasive. And thank you for sharing that, because we need to know, like, this person isn't being abused because of, you know, who they are or where they came from. Because I'm just thinking, that sometimes we put labels on victims and perpetrators based on what we might consider them to be. Okay. And so thank you for that explanation, and thank you for sharing with us that it really could be anyone. It really could be. I was doing some research for this show, and one gentleman, of course, I forgot his name, but he's an expert in this area. He had said the biggest indicator that he could find, the same like you, not demographics, not anything like that, was if you had grown up with abuse in your house, if you'd had seen it. And that was, through his research, that was the biggest thing that he could find as a commonality, for, and it wasn't always, but it was one of the things that sort of showed up more often than not, as far as, you know, relating this back to someone that might be a perpetrator, was, or even a victim, someone that had experienced it as a child. So, okay, good. Let me just check here to see if there are any other questions. Please do remember to drop them so that I can read them off as we are going along. We talked a little bit about this, and Desiree, I think this question is really for you, maybe just based on what you do in your experience. But tell me some of the reasons for violence. Tell me some of the reasons for domestic violence. Like, when you talk to the individuals that you're working with, what is the trigger? Why is this happening? Like, what do you get as far as reasoning for the abuse?
Well, Leticia, another broad question.
Yeah.
But I will say the reasons for the violence is that they don't know how to deal with anxiety and problem solve, and the lack of communication. No one ever taught them what a healthy relationship looks like. All they know is arguing, fussing, and fighting. That is one of the main reasons that they cannot get along up under the same roof, and they may have to separate. Once they gain some education on how to better communicate with their partner, it goes a long way. It helps them tremendously. Just not seeing eye to eye in the house and not understanding how to problem solve. They can't problem solve. That's the biggest thing I can come up with.
So violence is used as a means of communication where I can't find the words.
Yes.
Or I can't find actions for change.
I seen a quote one time that says, violence is for the people who do not know how to communicate. They resort to violence if they feel that, no, violence is for the unheard. It was something to that effect. Now I can't even get the words together, but because of lack of communication, violence ensues.
Okay, very good. Any other thoughts on that? I know I posted the question directly to Desiree, but any other thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of times, we've talked about how, especially when violence is normalized in a household, a lot of times people grow up around violence. Their environment is saturated with violence, and that's all they know. We do a pretty powerful exercise in our 12 men model in men's engagement, where we're directly engaging, young men and adult men in violence prevention. And we name the different types of abuse and then different examples of that type of abuse. And then we sort of flip the script on it and name the types of respect and the different examples of respect. And the lists of abuse are lengthy, and the lists of respect are very short. And we always ask the participants, what was harder to come up with, the types of abuse, the examples of abuse, or the examples of respect? And they always, always, always say the types of respect. And we say, well, why is that? And a lot of times they're dumbfounded. And it's because that a lot of times our environment is saturated with violence, and we don't focus on the positive side of things. If we constantly do programming where we teach young people about the types of abuse and not the types of respect, not how to have a healthy relationship instead of an unhealthy relationship, not how to practice healthy communication, then we can't get anywhere in terms of prevention and in terms of building healthy relationships and healthy communities as a whole.
Right.
And I think that's where that community piece comes in again, because over the many years, I've been offering similar presentations to what Eli describes. When you talk about, we mentioned there's a power and control wheel that lists all the different types of abuse. And then the other end of the spectrum is healthy, nonviolent relationships, and lists all the respect and trust and honesty and accountability. But when you share those after you've done that brainstorm Eli is talking about, you'll get a whole lot of people who will say, that doesn't exist, that other wheel. I've never seen a healthy relationship. I've never seen something with trust and accountability. Where are you getting that from? And we're not showing it, we're not living it ourselves, and we're not giving young people models for it. And until we do that, I think it's really hard to break the intergenerational cycles.
Well, as you guys were talking, I was just thinking about my personal life and how I was raised in a, I felt it was a good 2-parent home. My parents was married, and I thought it was just the best upbringing. And I didn't realize until I got older and I was able to go to college and I was able to learn different perspectives, going to SU and graduating in social work. And I was Randi actually came to one of my classes when I was a student at SU like 10 years ago. I had to learn that everything in my household I was raised with was not healthy. And I was raised in a hood. I seen fighting and violence regularly. I know what it's like when people say, oh, I'm just going to fight this person just because. I know they don't have the words, the vocabulary to say what they want to say and to defend themselves. So they will resort to fighting. I had to learn how not to fight as I moved through my life because it was not going to help me prosper as an individual. So I had to learn through going to school. Now, I had the opportunity to go to college. I'm the first one in my family to go to college and graduate college. So it was a big thing. So I can use a big word like trauma. My family's like, whoa, what is that? What's going on? I had to learn how to communicate when I'm angry versus fighting when I'm angry. So communication is big for me. Sometimes I'm still in awe of myself that I can get myself out of certain situations that I don't have to resort to what I was raised doing. It is every day, it is a growing process for myself because I can go to the gas station to get gas. One time I talked about it and the guy felt he should get gas before me and the argument could have ensued, but I had to learn to use my words and feel gratified by the words I chose to use. And I was able to leave. It could have been ugly if I did not learn how to use my vocabulary. And that was just huge. So vocabulary and communication is huge. And if you don't have it, you're fighting. That's just the way it is out in community. If they can't talk to you, they're fighting. I can't make it no more plain than that.
Yeah.
I was
right.
just gonna add, and I know we're getting a little pressed for time. I was thinking about the desperation of minorities and marginalized populations as it relates to socioeconomic disparities. You know, we say desperate measures cause for desperate actions. And I think sometimes um, not that it causes domestic violence, that's not the reason, but it definitely exacerbates it when you don't have food, when you don't have money. And Des talked a lot about it too, as we were talking earlier about COVID-19. But when you don't have food, and that's your everyday life, you know what I mean? You don't have food, you don't have money, you don't have jobs, you have all these things going on in certain minority and marginalized communities that exacerbate, worsen the condition of domestic violence issues. I just wanted to put that out there because that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I had a question come across from an audience member. What advice do you have for individuals who are concerned about a friend being involved with IPV? What is IPV?
Intimate partner violence. It's one of the ways, often that's used in a medical term. So maybe someone involved with medical, or it's used generally with people who are publishing sometimes. We use relationship violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence somewhat interchangeably, depending on the language that people use. And I would just start by saying, I think what's most important when you're concerned about somebody is that you show them how much you love and care about them, and you don't try and direct their life decisions. Because so many times in my experience at Vera House, someone's calling me up saying, I need you to talk to so-and-so and get them to go to your shelter, to get an order of protection, to call the police, to do what it is the other person wants them to do. And for the victim or survivor, that feels like the same thing. Somebody else is taking control of their life, just like the abuser. So if you can show them what we've been talking about, a healthy, respectful, trusting relationship, you can use your own I statements. I'm really scared from you. I hear you saying it's going to be okay. I'm scared for you. And I just can't have a real relationship with you if I don't tell you what I'm thinking. But I'm going to respect whatever decision you make, what might be helpful to you, because the more somebody knows that someone really loves and cares about them, the more likely they are to go to that person when they're considering any kind of change or making a move. And it's really hard to love and care about someone who's in an unsafe situation, which is why our 24-hour support line gets a lot of calls from those folks too. And that's okay. We're not just there for the direct victim or survivor, but for people who need some support to be present for others.
Very good. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
And let's not forget that we can also have them call the Vera House Crisis Hotline number.
Yeah.
So we have people on the phone 24 hours a day that can help them sort out their problems. They can talk about it. And that person on the other end of the phone can help them make a safety plan so that they're safe and make sure that they're in a safe place for the night.
Is it confidential?
The 24-hour, the crisis hotline number?
Yes.
No, it is the crisis hotline number is out.
I'm putting it in the chat for you, Des.
Okay.
Confidential in the sense that a person dialing in doesn't have to reveal their true identity.
Yes, there's two
Yes.
sides to confidentiality. Yes. You can call and give us your whole name and say you want to come into our shelter program and tell your whole life story. You can say, I don't want to tell you my name. You can say, just call me Mary. We don't discriminate on that 24-hour support line. If you call us and want support, we provide that. We will ask for a little more information if you want to engage in a different level of service, but you can call that hotline any time of the day or night. And we also, during COVID, added a chat line on our website. So we find sometimes for younger people and definitely for people trapped at home during COVID, unable to make phone calls, that having the chat line is something that someone could do a little more confidentially and safely. And so we do run that chat line usually from 8:30 in the morning till 11 p.m., 7 days a week. So that would be another option for the person to use.
Very nice. Thank you. I had another question here from an audience member. Can the panel speak more on narcissistic behavior of an abuser who abuses another? That's what the question is.
I think, I don't know if anybody has thoughts. We tend not to do a ton of mental health labeling in the models that we use in understanding domestic violence, because we do see it so much as a community and cultural issue with all these intersecting oppressions. But it doesn't mean that mental health issues don't exist, as I think our panelists were talking about earlier, recognizing how mental health crises are figuring into situations of domestic violence where people are in the criminal justice system. But when it comes to narcissism, which Des was talking about, fancy words we use, I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with that term, but it essentially means an unhealthy love and prioritization of one's own needs, oneself above all others. And so obviously it's hard to be in a healthy relationship with someone who loves and worships themselves above all others. So I think certainly someone who displays narcissism would really struggle to have the empathy and understanding when Desiree was talking about the communication and healthy relationship you're trying to create. It's very difficult to do that with someone who's focused entirely on themselves and not able to really acknowledge the other. But again, we don't do a lot of our work in the strict context of a mental health model.
Thank you. Tell me about barriers to women and men who are a victim, breaking their silence. What are some of the barriers to coming out and opening up about the abuse that you're facing?
There's many, and it's different for everybody. For some people, it's a source of shame. They don't want other people knowing that because it's a thing that may be embarrassing to them and may be traumatic to them. And a lot of times there's a difficult way of not knowing how to go about it, because oftentimes the criminal justice system, especially for people of color and people of marginalized identity, can re-traumatize people and make them feel as if they're, having violence inflicted upon them again, especially when they have to tell their story and they feel like they don't get anywhere, perhaps with the police and perhaps with other entities in the criminal justice system when they try to take that action. So there's many barriers. And a lot of times we do an exercise in men's engagement as well, where we talk about a time in our lives where we felt we had to make a change in our lives, but we weren't able to do that. And we compare that to making a big change in our life, to leaving an abusive relationship. And one of the factors that's never listed in the normal changes in your life is the fear for your safety and the fear for your life, which is completely possible when leaving an abusive relationship. So the barriers are numerous. There's a multitude and there's a variety of them.
The other thing to add on what Eli was sharing is that some of the barriers is people have to turn their lives upside down. They're leaving their home. Their kids are in school. They have to come into shelter. They have to rely on us, maybe transporting them. They have to go allow for someone else to shop for them. Their whole life has been turned upside down. They have to talk to their daycare providers and maybe take their kids out of daycare. Maybe kids are missing school for several reasons. And so now they have the school calling them. They have to find another place to live. There's so many different barriers as it relates to their life. Their whole life has basically been turned upside down.
And one more I would add that I think we don't always talk a lot about is that many times somebody in a relationship that's abusive also loves and deeply cares for the person who's hurting them. And I can't tell you how many times I have heard victims and survivors say, I just want the relationship to continue and the abuse to end. And so people hang on a long time on hope that this time it's different. They went to that program with Desiree and they said they're going to change. And so you keep hoping that you can keep the good parts, because it's not as simple. It's not an evil ogre. It's a human person who's been harmed and is doing harm. And so I think we have to give people space to bring that into the light and to acknowledge that the way somebody else may perceive the abusive person is not often how the victim or survivor is. Sometimes it's that raw fear, the case that you described where the person said, I was just so afraid, it was so bad that I literally thought I would die if I left and I had more control if I stayed. But sometimes it's more about, I love this person, and if we separate, I'm going to grieve. There's going to be loss. And we don't create a lot of space to talk about that truth. And I think that drives people in and out of these relationships sometimes.
Do you think that's because the thought is that you shouldn't love this person that's abusing you? Or other people's perception might be that?
I think from the outside, people think this is really simple.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody hit me once, that would be it. I would never, if somebody talked to me that way. But it often is much more complicated. People will sometimes say, I thought this was my soulmate. I've told this person things I never told another living being. I shared my traumas with them and they held me in a way I've never been held before. But then they broke my trust and they hurt me. And people feel like, well, then be gone. But healthy relationships are based on trying to figure these things out, right? That's what Des is, you're going to have conflict. And so your hope is that you can move past the hurt and the harm. But sometimes people can't do that within the relationship and they have to leave. But our experience is it takes people often 5 to 7 times if they're thinking about leaving before they leave for good, because they keep hoping and being aware of the parts of the relationship that were good.
And being brought back into that honeymoon phase, right? To the same woman that had talked about not knowing it was abuse. She also said that the honeymoon phase felt to her like she had power. Like when she went back and he needed her and he was willing to do whatever to get her back, she felt like the role had flipped and the power was in her hands, and she wanted that. She thought that if she had that, then they would be good, you know, on that side. And yeah, the things that we tell ourselves, right? Yeah. Talk to me about, you mentioned children, and I'm interested in this. You know, children is maybe a reason to stay. You don't want to disrupt your children's life. How are the people that are in close proximity to the abuse, how are they impacted? You know, how is a woman or a man's decision to stay in an abusive situation that has children, or even other people that are just in close proximity to it, people that love you, how are they impacted? How are the people that you love impacted by what you may be going through as a person that is being abused?
I think for children, it really, without getting some form of therapy or some help, it can really mess the kids up when they grow up, because they may enter into a relationship that is just as abusive as what they think is normal, which me and Cynthia talked about earlier. They think this is normal behavior because all they seen was mom and dad fighting all the time. So to that little girl, she may think he loves me if he fights me, if he hits me. It is very important to, you know, always say to people that kids just want to see their parents happy. And if it means them being apart, then that's what it has to be. Because sometimes we do more damage to kids staying in toxic relationships. And the damage is not where a parent can see it and they'll be like, oh, Johnny's going to be okay. The damage is going to happen in the long run. Then you're going to see that they are constantly in toxic relationships. And it looks similar to what mom and dad went through when they were younger. And it doesn't work. And we do more harm to our babies when we stay in relationships that are harmful.
And I think about many years ago, Futures Without Violence, a national anti-violence organization, they did a public service announcement, and it showed a child sitting on the steps in little faded pajamas. And the child is listening to a brutal assault in the kitchen. So in this case, mom is screaming, dad is swearing and yelling. And I mentioned I taught this family violence class, and I had people from the alternatives program who had completed it come and talk to our students. And I remember sharing that video and having one of the men reflect. And he had a 7-year-old son, about the age of the child, in this PSA announcement. And so I thought when we talked about it, he would say, now I recognize the impact on my son. But instead, first thing out of his mouth, I was that little boy on the stairs. So that was the first step, right? To recognize, wait, if you were that little boy on the stairs, who's on the stairs now? But going back to what Des is saying, that people haven't had a chance to do their own healing and recognize that harm. And we need to create space in our communities for the healing for children, for adults, for those who cause harm, for those who've been harmed. And I think conversations like this are an important beginning.
Sometimes we hear, I've heard the saying, well, I'm staying for the children. But what I think we just learned from this conversation is that that may not be the best for the children, right?
Right.
We're thinking keeping them in a stable environment, maybe stable in the sense that it's the same, it's not different from what it would be if you moved on, but likely nothing is stable about a situation where abuse is going on in the home and you stay and the children are there to witness it. So yeah, and it impacts other loved ones too. So not just children, but parents, brothers, sisters, siblings, if friends. You know, when we see our loved ones being hurt, we're deeply impacted by it as well. So
Right.
mhm. Yeah, so we are officially out of time, and I don't even know where the time goes for these conversations. I absolutely love them, each and every one. I learned something new, something different, a different perspective, a different way to think about these things, and I'm highly blessed and favored to be able to do this and to also share this information with my community. I thank you all for your time tonight, but I do want to get 2 more things out of you before we leave. I am just interested, so I need to know, how'd you get into this? How did you get into the line of work that you in? Just briefly, because I want to be cognizant of your time, but I need to know how you developed a passion for this, how you got into it, why are you doing what you do?
I can go because I tell this story all the time. So in like 2002, 2003, I was a student at SU. And I went back to school later in life. So I was in my early 30s, and Randi came to my class and talked about Vera House. I'd never heard about Vera House before. She talked about Vera House, the programs it had. I was a student and I said, I gotta get to work at that place. And once I graduated in 2004, there was never a job opening, never. Like I tried every year and I'm like, I gotta work at Vera House. They're doing great work there. So it wasn't until I graduated 2004, it wasn't until 2009, I seen a job opening and I jumped on it. And once I got in the Vera House, so I guess if you say since 2009, it'll be 12 years this year that I've been employed at Vera House. I love my job. I love the people I work with. I love being able to do the work. When people see me in community, I am my job. They know what I do, and it fills my soul. It makes me feel good knowing that I do something that makes me feel good and feeds my inner spirit.
That's awesome. That's when you're exercising your gift.
Love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah.
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 For me, I was a victim of domestic violence until June 1st, 1995 is when I got free. Went to college and started working in the field and just knew that my passion was to see other people in the community, being a native of community, being an African-American woman, wanted to see other women free as well. So dove into social work, had an encounter with, fast forward to 2016, had an encounter with Randi during a commencement service of serving on a board, learning how to serve on a board, and met Randi. Randi and I had lunch together a couple of times. I interviewed for a position to serve as a board of director for Vera House for 4 years. Did that until last year when I assumed the role as director of Vera House Shelter Services.
Wow. So I'm hearing a connection here. Randi, you just bringing everybody in.
I think Eli came in through other means, but I do a lot of active recruiting. I'll just tell my story briefly. I saw an ad in the newspaper. I never thought I wanted to be in the domestic violence field. I was graduating with my MSW in 1990, and I saw an ad for the coordinator of the Domestic Violence Coalition. And I thought, oh, that sounds like an interesting job. It wasn't a path I was looking for. I worked at Vera House about 6 months or a year, and all of a sudden I was overwhelmed with the sense of, I have found a calling. I didn't know this is what I was meant to do, but I am where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to do, surrounded by people I'm proud and honored to do the work with, and learning every day from the victims and survivors I work with. And now it's all these years later and still fills my heart in the same way. And Eli, I don't know your exact story, so.
Yeah, I think it's kind of two paths. One of it is from my college experience, studying sociology and learning really about the ways that masculinity is formed and how masculinity, especially toxic masculinity and unhealthy masculinity, really fuels a lot of men's behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs that can lead to domestic violence and unhealthy relationships, both with women and other men. So I thought that was really interesting, how masculinity is sort of this thing that's a lot of times unexplored in our society, and it's right in front of our faces all the time. And then the other thing was, after I came back from college, just the passion of working in the Syracuse community, the school district that I attended and the community that I was born in and loved. So combining those two things, Vera House, kind of was the perfect match for me, especially in the field of men's engagement, to inspire other men in being, a solution to violence against women, both domestic violence and sexual violence. Oftentimes there's a little bit of a side. We say that it's interesting that a lot of times we see women spearheading this work when men are the main perpetrators of it. And to really get behind that and do preventative work, we need men's engagement too, and men to explore their own masculinity and their own selves in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. I think you're so right about that. And I know the work that each of you are doing is so important. The last thing, and I know we're over time, is just tell me a little bit more about Vera House. I just want to hear about the mission. And then if people need support, where do they go? How do they get connected up? How do they seek that support?
I think Desiree mentioned the 24-hour support line, 315-468-3260. I don't know if there's an easy way to make sure that that's in the chat where people might need it. Yep. But also, if you go to our website, www.verahouse.org, our hotline is right there, the access to chat, to talk with someone for support. And a lot of information about our programs and services are available there. So that's usually, I think of the hotline as the gateway to our agency. It can just be for a conversation, or it can get you connected with any of the programs you've heard about today or any of the services that we offer.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, with that, I will end this show on Behind the Walls, Domestic Violence in 2021. It's been so revealing to me, and I can't thank you enough for the time that you've spent with me, talking to me about domestic violence, all kinds of violence, how it happens, when it happens, how we can get support, and how we can have hope in this issue as well. So thank you again for your time, and everyone have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Thank you.